Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, a crossover episode with Lockdown Warriors previewing the series. Game 1 tonight. We'll talk about all things Wolves, all things Warriors, what to expect on both sides of the floor. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Lockdown Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals. The second round starts tonight. Today, a very special episode of Lockdown Wolves. I have a crossover episode with Charlie Walter of Lockdown Warriors. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff about the series, what to expect on both sides of the floor, who's guarding who, how the Wolves could exploit a really good Warriors team. I have some thoughts on that. I want to get his thoughts on how the Warriors are going to go score against Minnesota. They struggled to score against Houston. The Wolves and Rockets have different defenses, but both really good defenses. So curious to get his thoughts on that. We'll get into that here in just a moment. A big thank you off the top for making the show your first listen every day. Of course, you can find it everywhere. You can also watch on YouTube and on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Let's jump in today. Myself and Charlie Walter from Lockdown Warriors. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into that conversation.
Ben Beecken of Locked On Wolves joining me today as we have the Locked On Wolves, Locked On Warriors crossover ahead of the Tuesday matchup, Game 1, between these two teams that almost had identical records. The Warriors finished just one game below Minnesota in the standings. The Warriors won head-to-head during the regular season. But due to the whole size issue that the Dubs have, I think a lot of the national public and probably a lot of Wolves fans are feeling very confident about this series. Want to kind of do things this way, Ben. First of all, good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you as well.
I want to ask you some questions about the Wolves, kind of introduce Warriors fans to what we can expect from this series, because it's the first time we've seen these two teams match up fully healthy, and from the Warriors standpoint with Jimmy Butler. And then we'll switch it over to you. You can ask me some questions about the Warriors, and the goal here is to have the fans of both teams pretty knowledgeable about both squads, weaknesses, strengths, that sort of thing. So starting off with Minnesota, it's as simple as this. Anthony Edwards is a superstar. You got a lot of size around him. You got some shooting around him. A well-balanced team Minnesota is defensively, offensively. They can grab rebounds. What is the weakness that the Golden State Warriors can exploit from Minnesota?
It's a great question. The Wolves, so in the regular season, their biggest weakness was crunch time. Minnesota had a terrible point differential, or I should say a really good point differential, a bad record. Against that, their Pythagorean win-loss record was like 4 or 5 wins better. But that, and I guess the Lakers series didn't actually have that many crunch time games either. They kind of pulled away. I think only one game really would have fit that criteria. So I would say late game execution. And that against a veteran team like the Warriors and a veteran coach who's been there and won like Steve Kerr, that could be an issue. And we obviously that conversation then becomes how much of that is coaching versus execution by the players. And, usually falls somewhere in the middle. And so that would be something to keep an eye out for. Inevitably, there's going to be some very close games in this series. That would probably be the biggest thing for me. Minnesota also has a tendency to allow things to snowball. And there were a couple of games this year where it was like, they have a lead and they had a 24-point lead on the Bucks, second to last week of the regular season. If they had won this game, they would have ended up with home court. I think they would have been 4th in the West. And they were up 24 in the fourth quarter, and just a zone, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. I have questions for you about the Warriors zone, completely threw them off. And they lost a 24-point fourth quarter lead because they just completely ceased to function offensively. And so that would be another thing, is just kind of like both execution against the zone, which is going to be an issue. And then also, can they, there's kind of this like kind of haywire factor to Minnesota occasionally. They didn't show it in the Lakers series. They maintained composure for the most part throughout. But there are still some maturity things, and they've got vets. Like, everybody refers to them just like a young team. But I mean, Mike Conley's 37. Rudy Gobert's on the other side of 30. I mean, they've got guys who have been around the leagues. Dante DiVincenzo at this point has been in big games, as you know. So I think there's some of those kind of wild cardy things. Otherwise, they're a really balanced team. I mean, you look at like they could beat you in a lot of different ways. Minnesota is a top 10 defense, top 10 offense. They were one of, I think, 5 teams with that distinction this year in the NBA. They can play fast. They're a really good shooting team. They can play big, they can play small. They close games against the Lakers with Rudy on the floor. They close games with him off the floor. So the Wolves are a very well-rounded team, and there's just kind of some of these like things on the periphery that they'll kind of rear their ugly head, and it's like, here we go again. It's a crunch time collapse or whatever. So, there's certainly the possibility that comes up, but for the most part, it's not a team that has any like, they're horrible on the glass or anything like that. They're fairly well-rounded.
I'm fired up. It's such a different series than Houston. And granted, the size factor is similar in a sense. One thing that's different is like Şengün, you give him the ball on the block, he's going to score down there. Gobert, not necessarily a polished offensive player that you're going to expect to put up 30 like Şengün can do on a given night. Reid hangs around the perimeter a little bit. McDaniel, although he's tall, he's not necessarily the most physical person in the league and is more versatile than some of the bigs that Houston has, like Steven Adams and company. So completely different squad in that sense. And the biggest thing is with Houston, 30 seconds left in the game, it was who are they going to put the ball in their hands to make a play and win the game? There's no question who that player is on the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's an interesting dynamic in the sense that we have Anthony Edwards, maybe the future of basketball, one of the faces of the game, especially with his personality. And then you have Steph Curry, who some would say was the face of the game. Many would say still is the face of the game. And this is like one of those series where some say it's the future against the past. And I guess Warriors fans want to know, is it still the present? Does Golden State have a chance to get it done? Like Curry, Edwards, how excited are you to see these guys on the same floor playing meaningful basketball? Because we haven't seen it yet in the playoff series.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun. Actually, there was an interview with Ant. I don't actually know what it was from. It surfaced. I saw it on Twitter a couple days ago where he was asked last year after the season. It was like a GQ interview or something like, who do you most want to play in the playoffs? And he said something like, we're going to go further next year. And then he said, I really want to play the Warriors, Golden State. And then he was asked why. And he said, because he wants to play Draymond because Draymond talks so much trash. So it's funny. He didn't mention Steph in the response, but of course maybe we'll talk about the Draymond Rudy stuff. But like Ant versus Curry is an Ant, just like that's his personality. And everybody talks about this, but it is so true. Like last year he beat KD in the first round and, beat Jokic in the second round and fell to Luka in the conference finals. This year he beats LeBron and Luka in the first round. So now he's beaten Luka, he's beaten KD, he's beaten LeBron, he's beaten Jokic. And Curry is kind of like, I don't know that he's the next boss, but like
he's a checklist. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly how Ant thinks. Like he wants to be the guy going at the guy. But I think the growth that he's shown this year, at least so far in the playoffs through the 5-game series win over the Lakers, is he wants to be the guy, which is what you want. But he doesn't think he has to be the guy in the sense of scoring. And we saw him distribute, like, I think it was game 4, which was a pivotal game, the last game in Minnesota before going back to LA. If you lose that game, you go back to LA tied, and now you've lost home court if you're the Wolves, and 2 of the last 3 are played in LA. So you really want to win that game at home. And Anthony Edwards scored a bunch of points early in the fourth. He hit a couple of deep threes. And then the Lakers were aggressively putting 2 on the ball, and he started deferring. He didn't score the final 8 minutes of the game, but the Wolves won kind of going away down the stretch because he was distributing so adeptly and like knowing what the right play was and making the right play, not trying to force stuff. And it's very easy to go back and look at last year's conference finals against Luka and the Mavs, where Ant would just ignore a wide open corner 3-point shooter because he's like, all right, I'm going to do this myself. And you want a little bit of that in the guy who is the guy, but he needs to also be able to know when it's time to call someone else's number and to make the right choice. And he's made that step so far. Obviously, he's got to do it again and again and again if they want to win a championship. But it's really encouraging. And obviously, Steph has proven that for years. And I we'll talk about this. I'm curious to see how the Wolves go about defending Steph, and I'm curious to see if we get, not that Curry and Ant are necessarily going to guard each other a ton. If my memory serves correctly, I believe the Warriors were willing to live with Steph on Ant at times on switches in the regular season. It actually worked out okay. I don't know that. I think Ant had one big game of the 4 against the Warriors. So I'm curious to see that. But I think going toe for toe, we're undoubtedly going to get at least 1 or 2 games where each of these guys is hitting, 28 footers down the stretch and they're just going toe to toe. That's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, and since the emergence of Butler, Warriors have been able to, step up the ball pressure a little bit to where if Anthony Edwards, let's say he beats Butler off the dribble, Draymond's sitting there, or vice versa on a switch. If it's, beats Curry off the dribble, whatever. I mean, Ant's got the mid-range working at all times, but the Warriors, despite being small, and Rockets fans will be the first ones to tell you this, and Celtics fans in 2022, like, for whatever reason, the Warriors have been able to neutralize the fact that they're not a big team, and they can really, put pressure on the rim and make it pretty difficult. I find it really funny that the Wolves front office took so much heat from the national public about the Rudy Gobert trade years ago. Works out fine considering they made the conference finals last year. Then they do it again this offseason. They take a ton of heat for the Karl Anthony Towns, Julius Randle trade. People are like, what are you doing, Minnesota? At what point did kind of the Wolves public and the fans and everyone associated with the team realize that this was going to work out okay and that Randle was a pretty good fit?
Yeah, I mean, well, last year it took a while. Well, actually, there were 2 seasons of Gobert and Towns, and it wasn't until like early last year where it was like, okay, this Twin Towers thing can actually work. And then the thing with Randle was that, he's not a traditional spacer and in at least not in any sense of what Karl Anthony Towns was. And so my concern was, is he going to want to be creating for himself? And yes, Randle's a better passer than Towns, but Julius Randle has usually been the guy on his teams. And last year was injured in the playoffs when Jalen Brunson was the guy for the Knicks. And so there was a lot of question about the offensive kind of synergy, and it did take some time. I would say there was a stretch kind of late January, early February where Julius Randle, it just started playing really well, and he wasn't scoring a ton. It was like he was putting up 18 and 7 and having 4 or 5 assists, and it was just like really solid play. Then he got hurt. I think it was a hamstring or a quad or something. I think it was a hamstring, and he missed like the entire month of February, I guess it was. Came back in March and was awesome the rest of the season. And he even said a couple things in the media to the effect of, I realized that I don't need to score 20 every game. Like he literally should, like, to show that level of awareness. And he should at this point in his career, but to say that out loud and to understand that, like, hey, I can be the number 2. And that's been super important when teams do choose to put 2 on the ball against Ant. Julius Randle's job is to punish mismatches, to punish a defense that's in rotation. And he did that against the Lakers. He was so good against the Lakers. Like, Ant was the best player in the series. You could argue Julius Randle was the second best player because he also guarded both LeBron and Luka and did a good job with it. And neither LeBron or Luka did a whole lot defensively themselves. Like, you could argue Julius Randle was the second best player in that series, and I wouldn't call you crazy. It learning how to play with each other. And the Wolves started the year with kind of a my turn, your turn offense. And now it's Ant understanding if there's 2 on me, somebody's open. It's going to find Julius. And if he doesn't score, it's going to swing back to me. And now I've only got 1 on me because the ball moved and it rotated around the perimeter. And they've understood that, like, they can both get the ball, have the ball in their hands. They can, one might score more than the other, but they're both going to get assist opportunities. So it really did take until the final third of the season, final quarter of the season for it to click. And it looks better now than it did at any point during the regular season, for sure.
Coming up, Ben puts me on the hot seat. We learn a little bit about the Golden State Warriors' strengths and weaknesses as we enter this Game 1 matchup, Warriors and Wolves.
Today's crossover episode of Locked On Wolves and Locked On Warriors is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Right now, headed into this series, Anthony Edwards did not have a very good scoring night, not a very good shooting night in Game 5, the closeout game against the Lakers. I think he is going to be trending upward headed into this series from a scoring standpoint. If you're looking at a prop bet, an over-under on Anthony Edwards, like, that's what I would look at. I mean, we'll see what the Golden State defensive strategy is. Maybe if they start putting 2 on the ball, you start looking at the assists over. Of course, you could also combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action's unfolding. So you can see, okay, Golden State is going to put 2 on the ball against San. I don't think they will, but they are. Maybe we'll go assists over, and we could take the under on whatever that live point total is. You could do all that over during the game on FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Charlie, let's talk a little. I've got some questions about the Warriors, and we talked. You mentioned this in the open. The Wolves and Warriors haven't played since like January 15th, way before the Butler trade. The Wolves basically were, I think, fully healthy for all 4 games in the regular season. So Wolves fans haven't seen the Wolves play this version of the Warriors team in a long time. So there's a lot to learn here. The thing that there's a couple things I really want to hit on. One is the Warriors have such a unique defensive profile. So for somebody that hasn't watched the Warriors a ton, like if you look at all their numbers, like on cleaning the glass, they're like the best in the league at forcing teams to shoot mid-range shots. Like opposing offenses shoot more mid-range shots against the Warriors than anybody else, which is of course a good thing for the Warriors. But the Warriors are also the best at deterring rim attempts. Now, when teams get to the rim, they shoot a pretty high percentage against Golden State. We talked already about how they're not a very big team. But what kind of goes into that, where the Warriors are conceding some of these mid-range shots, but not letting guys get all the way to the rim and try and score on a team that doesn't have too many, true rim protectors. My mind goes to the zone, but they obviously don't play the zone. I know they play it more post Butler trade, but it's not like the Warriors are playing the zone every time down. So what does that look like for the Warriors defensively? What do you think their overall strategy would be in a series like this?
It's like a bend, but don't break mentality. It's so strange to watch because individually they do have some really good defenders, but even pre-Jimmy Butler, and granted Wiggins was a great defender too, they still just got it done. And the engine's Draymond Green, obviously. He just has this strange way about him where he's like a magnet towards the ball. And if the Warriors defenders one-on-one make a mistake, Draymond's just kind of there. Hand up in the air, hand in the passing lane. He's just a presence at all time. And that presence, when you get close to the rim, it's that bend but don't break mentality. You saw it so many times with the Rockets where it felt like they were getting decent looks. Like I look at it when I used to play 2K back in the day. I always wondered, like 2K11, I'd be the Thunder and I'd be Cephalosha and company, and I'd have wide open 3-footers, not wide open, contested 3-footers, and they would never make the shot. And I'm like, why is this shot so difficult in this game? And it's because it's difficult in real life. When you have, 6'9" defenders that are physical, hand in your face, bumping you down low, 4 feet, 5 feet away from the bucket, those aren't easy shots. I mean, just ask Şengün. He was, near the bucket the entire series down low. They were putting pressure on the rim, it seemed like, at all times. So when you say the mid-range game, the Warriors allow some of that. At times this season, yes, but when it came to the Rockets, it was simply they turned them over and won the games. When they turned them over, they put a lot of pressure on the ball. And then I think a lot of it has to do with, again, going back to Draymond and Butler. They play so well with each other. They're allowed to take gambles. A lot of those gambles lead to deflections. They lead to steals the other way. The Warriors are pretty good in transition, although they did want to slow it down against the Houston Rockets and kind of muck up the game, grind it out. But from what I've seen in this postseason, and it may be different against Minnesota, you can get it close to the rim against the Warriors, but they just affect shots. They make 7-footers extremely difficult, and they weren't always grabbing the rebounds against the Rockets. But when they are getting up there and snatching it, and not letting you get multiple shot opportunities, it's been a really good defense. In fact, a lot of times this season, it's been blown assignments and wide open threes that have killed the Warriors. It's never really been on the interior aside from the Rockets series. And most of them were, second chance points to where it was kickouts for threes and things like that. But it truly doesn't make sense that the Warriors have basically no center aside from the 11 minutes from Kevon Looney and, Quentin Post at 7 feet that hangs out around the perimeter and is not necessarily the most physical, although he has shown some signs of light defensively. It's just strange how the Warriors have been able to do it. And they did the same thing in 21-22. Looney was their big man then. and he's their lone big man now, and they're still doing the same thing, deterring shots around the rim.
Yeah, you mentioned the Warriors turning the Rockets over in the first round series. That's the pace and I guess everything around the pace is something I'm very curious about this series, because neither team plays at like a really fast pace normally, but they both can do it. And like post Jimmy Butler trade, like I was every time I was pulling numbers, I was looking at pre and post and like the season as a whole. And Golden State's played faster with Jimmy Butler, but it's also, I think, probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're also number one in the NBA in opponent turnover rate. They have a force in the regular season post Butler trade, have forced opponents to turn it over almost 18% of the time, which must be feeding these transition opportunities. And from the Wolves side, the Wolves are also top 10 in the regular season at forcing opponent turnovers. And they really only run off of, they don't run after rebounds. They don't take the ball to the net and run. They're running with, they're trying to be opportunistic by forcing turnovers and running. Is that also kind of the Warriors style? And like, I'm just overall curious, like, what's the pace of this series look like? Is this just each team kind of trying to, like duck and dodge and pick their spots to run, and then otherwise just being very careful they don't let the other team get out and run amok and get a bunch of open threes in transition?
It's interesting you bring that up, because preseason Steve Kerr's entire mantra was, we're going to get back to really finishing in transition, being a highly efficient transition offensive team, and having a good transition defensive team, being a good transition defensive team. And they've kind of, you're right, they've picked and choosed their spots this season. And what I find fascinating about the Warriors defense is just the team defense aspect of it. You have a lot of defenders that do a lot of different things well. For example, you have Moses Moody that on the ball can cause some havoc with his 7'1" wingspan at the, shooting guard, small forward position, whatever he's playing. Although we've seen him play some 4 recently with how small the Warriors have been going. Podziemski just gives you incredible effort. Not a great defender by any means, but he's good enough. And one thing that he does is, if you do get out in transition and try to run on him, he's going to take a charge just about every single time. I think he was 3rd in the league this year, 2nd in the league last year. So he can really neutralize the fast break when he gets back there. He's just tactically a really smart defender, knows where to be, and knows how to take a charge. And that can't be understated. Curry, I thought, was excellent in Game 7 against the Rockets. Like, he was really good on the defensive side of the ball. That can't be overlooked. Draymond is Draymond. I mean, he finished 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year and made an argument to win that award. Jimmy Butler's still an outstanding defender at this age. And it just all kind of collectively works. And no matter who you throw in there, Kevon Looney protecting the rim, it just seamlessly works. And I think that's a little bit of the reason why we haven't seen a ton of Jonathan Kuminga. Good on the ball defender, gives great effort, has tremendous length and upside, and a defensive presence that can be really good in this league. But when it comes to team defense, knowing where to be, picking up his teammates, I would have to imagine that Steve Kerr sees a little bit of a weakness in his game in that department. And that's why he hasn't been playing, along with a multitude of other reasons. But yeah, that's the biggest thing with the Warriors to me, is they're always picking each other up. Someone's beat off the ball, and Draymond's there, Jimmy's there, really neutralizing the mistakes that the teammates have. It's a really good team defense that, again, like I said, they bend at times, but they don't break, and they, for the most part, don't allow teams to get really hot from inside the arc. Usually a lot of the damage is done from the perimeter, it feels like.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I noticed in going through the numbers, is that the Warriors have struggled at times to defend the perimeter, and opponents shoot really well and really frequently from the corners against Golden State, which again could be one of those things that's influenced by when Golden State does go to basically a 3-2, 1-2-2 type zone. If that can kind of feed into that. Last question for you before we kind of get into some like fun questions about the series and X factors and things like that. Who do you think defensively, matchup wise, like we've seen teams put smalls on Rudy Gobert and try and make him like actually, try and score. Obviously it didn't work for the Lakers in Game 5, but it worked pretty much the rest of the series. Or, does Jimmy Butler guard Ant? Does he maybe even guard Julius Randle? I think the Rudy question is really fascinating. or do you think it's just more of a fluid, like, I guess what do you think is the strategy to start with, at least for Golden State defensively?
I don't think you see a single double team on Rudy Gobert. Obviously, you didn't see it on Şengün for the most part. They were letting, Draymond just defend him one-on-one down low. Even when, Şengün was switching on Pods, for example, they're like, Pods, just, make them beat you.
That's what I was going to ask, actually, is if you think that Podziemski might actually guard Rudy. Like, is that the matchup and they just live with it?
I mean, if the switch happens, like, they're going to live with it. And I don't think they're going to throw many doubles Rudy's way. They're going to make him beat you, because I don't see any way that they allow, single coverage on Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle to, have that 2-man attack and beat you. I mean, the perimeter is where I feel like the Wolves are going to beat you offensively. It scares me defensively, because the Warriors can settle for jump shots. We saw it at times against the Rockets. Unfortunately, they hit 18 threes in Game 7, and that was the deciding factor. Without 9 Buddy Hield threes, the Warriors don't win that game. But for the most part, the Warriors are at their best when they attack the rim, and usually the main culprit of that is Jimmy Butler. He can get downhill. He can finish just about whenever he wants, and if he doesn't, he's going to make the smart play, kick it, and teammates are going to get good looks. So that's something that I look at in this series. Rudy Gobert protects the rim as well as anyone in this game. Naz Reid, McDaniels, all these guys, they bring size to the table and length that can really affect the driving lanes. And that's my biggest dynamic. Like, how are the Warriors going to play this thing? How many jump shots are they going to take? If the shot's not falling, how are they going to get inside? They don't have a really back to the basket big. Jimmy Butler is probably the best they have in that regard, and back to the basket, making a move. So that's a dynamic to me that could be fascinating if the Warriors aren't hitting shots, because they've been very Jekyll and Hyde, even in games this season. It's not like when they're hot. I mean, granted, Game 7, Buddy Hield was hot early and he was hot often, but there are a lot of times where they'll hit 9 threes in a 5-8 minute span, and they look like the best shooting team in the NBA. They fall in love with the 3, and then they go one of their next 13, and they allow a 15-point lead to dwindle. They did it to the Spurs multiple times. They did it to the Jazz earlier in the season. Didn't matter who the team was. When they fall in love with the threes and they don't knock them down and they don't attack the rim, that's where they can fall in some trouble. The good news is for the Warriors, they're playing the best defense they've played this entire season, so they can win the muck it up game too, as long as they're not allowing Ant to go for 40.
All right, let's talk about just a few more kind of overall questions about this series. Some final thoughts here. Maybe we'll do, I don't know. I'm open. Let's do some predictions maybe at the end of this. So yeah, we'll do that here next.
Oh, I have it on my end. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I got one more on the Wolves that I want to ask you about. Naz Reid brings tremendous size to the table, but he also hovers around the perimeter quite a bit, which can be a huge mismatch for a lot of teams, especially, honestly, with the Warriors. Like, if Post is on the floor and they have him guarding Naz Reid at times, Naz Reid, it feels like he has quicker feet than Quentin Post and can get past him, can make a move, has a pull-up game. What is Naz Reid's back-to-the-basket game like in terms of bruising you down low?
He's actually got great post moves. The Wolves just don't go to it very often. But when you were talking about that last segment, I was thinking, like, Naz's preferred game is, play face-up game. He'll shoot from like 30 feet. Got great range. Obviously rating 6th man of the year from last season. Actually had better numbers this year. It's just, the Wolves weren't as good as a team. They won 7 less games, so nobody was talking about Naz, but he actually had a better season this year. He's the Wolves' best post player. They're not going to go to it a lot, but if he's got a small on him, if Post isn't in the game and he ends up with just a smaller guy on him, I don't know that Chris Finch doesn't call for many post-ups, but if that's the result of a play, like, the Wolves will be completely fine with that. Naz loves to kind of, crab dribble middle and get somebody on his hip and throw up a little hook, and he's really good doing that. He's great facing up. Actually, his offensive game is a little bit reminiscent of a little bit more of a perimeter-oriented Karl-Anthony Towns. Like, their games were always relatively similar, where they can face up and shoot the 3, and then if you come out to shoot the 3, he's more athletic than Karl-Anthony Towns. He's not quite as tall, but he's more athletic. and he's longer, I think, in terms of wingspan. That first step is very quick. And if he's got a big guarding him, like you said, he'll face up, he'll take him to the basket. If he's got a small, he can take him in the post, or he'll just shoot a three over them. I mean, he was 41% from three last year. He was 38% this year. Like he can score from anywhere, and he's still, even after winning that award last year, I think one of the more underrated players. And he was really good defensively in the Lakers series too, was asked to guard Luka at times and did a good job with it. I actually was going to say he's kind of my non-star, my non, if we want to take out Ant and take out Randle, like he would be my X factor. Yeah. And I was going to ask you the same thing. Like, and for all those reasons too, by the way, I think the Warriors they're going to have a tough time defending Naz for the reasons you cited. Bigs can't really guard him and smalls can't really guard him. And the Warriors do have some of those kind of mid-sized guys, but like, this feels like a series where the pace is going to benefit Naz and he'll have some opportunities. Setting aside Steph Curry and setting aside Jimmy Butler. And I mean, I put Draymond and Rudy kind of in the category where they're both going to be impactful, but neither one of them is going to lead their team in scoring at any point. I say that Rudy did it in game 5 against the Lakers, but who would your like X factor be for the Warriors? If they're going to win this series, who is the player that's going to step up?
I've been saying it for a while, man. It's the mantra of like, it takes a village, because with this team, you're not getting consistent. Curry is Curry, minus a few games this season. He's been excellent since Jimmy Butler's joined the fold, like minus a few years, a decade ago. This is as good as Steph Curry's played, like legit. And granted, the thumb has been affecting his shot a little bit in the last week or two, but he scored 50 points multiple times in the last couple months. Like, he has been outstanding. Jimmy Butler, playoff Jimmy, is real. He's going to give you consistent action every single night. Regular season, Butler, as we know, had some duds, some games where he was really deferring and, may have had 9 assists, but only had 6 points, whatever. But since the playoffs have come around, like, Jimmy's giving you 28 and 6 seemingly every night. The villagers, though, the Buddy Hields, the Brandon Pajemskis, the Moses Moody's, the Gary Paytons, they can go for, 3 points any given night. Or, as we've seen in the case of Pajemski, he can go for 25. Or, as we've seen in the case of Buddy Hield, we now know he can go for 9 threes and 33 points. Payton can give you 15. Post can knock down 5 threes and give you 15 points. Santos can give you incredible energy off the bench. The question is, like, it's like the mix and match. How many of the Warriors role players are going to step up? And the nice thing is usually someone is on. If no one is on, they're screwed. Like, Jimmy and Steph can't carry the load in that sense. They need someone to knock down shots. They need to take advantage of the gravity that Steph is going to provide every single play. They get clean looks. They got to knock them down. If you want me to point to one, I would say Pajemski, because he's shown us in the last month or two and even in the last week that he can give you 25. But Buddy Hield's right there too, because the statistics back it up. I kind of lost track like midway through the season, but I think at one point it was 18-1 were the Warriors when Buddy scored more than 17 in a game, I believe it was. So like, you get 17 points from Buddy Hield, the Warriors win just about every single game. It's how they got off to such a hot start without Butler, when they had a squad that consisted of Melton and Kyle Anderson and Schroeder and whoever it may have been at that point. They were winning games. Schroeder wasn't on the team, but you know what I'm saying? They were winning games because Buddy Hield was playing out of his mind. So if they can get that version of Buddy, it's a huge X factor as well. Question that I have for you is, because the Warriors have been really good at blitzing ball screens, and, especially with Jalen Green, after that 38-point effort that he had, the next game, he was off the ball screens. Draymond was there in his face, switching on him, blitzing, and really affecting everything, causing a lot of turnovers. That's how the Warriors get a lot of their turnovers, is off the ball screen action, just really causing havoc with their tenacity defensively. How does Anthony Edwards handle that sort of pressure? I would imagine pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, Ant was actually blitzed on pick and roll plays more than any other player in the NBA this year. It was like something like 16% of the time he was blitzed off pick and rolls. There were 2 on the ball, and he, points per possession wise, was lower on that list. Like, if you look at the list of guys, it's who you'd expect. It's the SGAs and guys like that. and his points per possession was much lower than, not significantly lower, but lower than all those other guys. And it was an issue. And it took him a minute to kind of learn how to decipher some of that and then make the right decision. Obviously, he's got the ability to do the right thing if he makes the right choice, or to execute what he wants to do, that is. But against the Lakers, like, LA didn't want to put 2 on the ball early in the series. Then they realized they tried switching stuff. Then they realized they had to put 2 on the ball. And then they tried like the pseudo zone thing in game 2 that the Lakers won. Ant even said post game, "Hey, I was a little confused by this. It looked like a zone, but I don't think it was a zone, and I'll have to watch the tape." And then sure enough, he figured it out. He realized that, like, hey, they're just like, they're switching off the ball. Like, we're running actions through to try and get guys, to try and move around the defenders, and the defenders aren't moving. It's not really a zone. They're just passing off the other players. So whoever's in proximity to Ant is also essentially guarding him. So they were kind of trying to pen him in, almost like play really, try and wall up and play the gaps and clog the driving lanes. So, and then later in the series, the Lakers said, "You know what, we have to blitz him." And so they were, and then that's when Ant started to pick him apart. And I referenced the game 4, play earlier, or how he played late in game 4 with making those right choices. So that to me is a concern for this series, simply because the Warriors are so good at it, and Draymond Green is better than any defenders that this version of the Lakers has, obviously. So because it's Draymond Green, and because the Warriors are so good at forcing turnovers, and they've got some athleticism around Draymond and guys that can pick passes off and go the other way, that would make me a little bit nervous as a Timberwolves fan, is the Warriors' ability to turn teams over. And we've seen Minnesota have those moments. Both Ant and Julius Randle are prone to high turnover games. It didn't happen in the first round. Julius Randle had like a 7 turnover game. Ant, I think, turned it over 6 times total in 5 games. As a team, the Wolves' turnover percentage is only 10% against the Lakers. But again, the Warriors are a better defense with better defensive personnel and better, I would say, better coached, and just in a better place to execute some of those things. So I think Ant will be fine, but they may lose a game because, if along the way, because of kind of trying to figure out how to play against the Warriors and then putting 2 on the ball. That to me is something to look out for. And if I'm Golden State, I would be pretty aggressive with it, because if you're kind of half-hearted like the Lakers, Ant's going to be able to pick it apart. And of course, he's athletic enough to just split doubles at times. And if you don't do it with the right guys and don't do it hard enough, he's just going to dribble right through you and score through him anyway. So I think that'll be really intriguing to watch that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the matchups that I want to see is how, because you mentioned the Wolves can go small, and I would imagine that they're going to start off going big, going the route that Houston took and trying to affect the game that way. But the thing about the Warriors is, and they've been doing this for forever, they zip the ball around, man. They don't, I mean, at times they're a little bit stagnant, but when the Warriors are truly playing their best basketball and humming, that thing zips around. Curry's moving off the ball. There's confusion everywhere. There's back cuts. You'll see Draymond. You'll see, Jimmy is the prime example of someone that just knows where to be at all times. And he puts himself in the spot that he needs to be to make a play. Not only that, even with a few seconds left on the shot clock, he has this corner line drive 3 that he chucks up, and he's been hitting it at a pretty good rate in the playoffs. Like, for those of you, and granted, it's like I'm trying to explain Jimmy Butler to Wolves fans. I sometimes forget that that's a dynamic. Like, what is the homecoming going to be for Jimmy Butler in this series?
It's a whole thing. So, like, on the one hand, there's no players in Minnesota that he played with. Completely, the like 2 coaching staffs later, basically nobody in the front office, like, other than like trainers. There's no like, team adjacent personnel, but the fan base is going to be ready for Jimmy. I don't know if you saw, I think it was last year, he came with the Heat. It was in street clothes on the bench. Like, famously now, it's been like 7 years since they traded him. He's only played 3 times at Target Center, partly because he's been in the East, but also partly because he's avoided it. Like, he's legitimately avoided, like, he sat one game out for, there was some legitimate personal reasons along the way. There was one game that was a rest game, and he finds a way to not play. And so he was in street clothes on the bench, and the fans were chanting, "We want Jimmy," and he blew a kiss to the crowd. And like that, like, there's a level, like, it's going to be, the Wolves fans have not forgotten, even if nobody on the court is going to really care on the Wolves side. And I think Jimmy said something on Sunday. He was asked about it, and he said something like, "Don't ask me about Minnesota." Like, he's, Jimmy Butler, he's going to play right into this. Like, he's going to just kind of, like he's expecting all of this. He wants the smoke. That's how Jimmy Butler is. And Wolves fans are going to give it to him. And if you look at what he's done, his teams, I think, are 1-2, like Miami and Philly, both those teams together. Like that's how far back we're going to get to these 3 games that he's played at Target Center. He only had like 1 good game. The other games are like 12 and 16 point totals. So it'll be interesting to see if he like lets the game come to him, or if he tries to be a little more aggressive, or what that is going to look like. But trust me, the Wolves crowd is going to be more than ready for boos and chants and whatever else they want to throw at Jimmy Butler.
What are we thinking? How many games is this series going?
So I think the Wolves will win the series. I think I have 6. I think it'll be 6 games, and I know that means they'd win on the road, but the Wolves have been a really good road team all year. They closed out the Lakers on the road. They won 2 out of 3 there. They were actually better on the road than they were at home this year comparatively. So I actually think the Wolves win in 6. And I think basically every game is going to be really close. I think there's going to be a lot of really close games in the series. But that's my prediction is Wolves in 6.
I mean, I'm going to go with the Warriors in 6, obviously, just like I did against the Rockets. And granted, I was a game off, but we'll go. You got Wolves in 6. I got Dubs in 6. So it's going to be fun, man. It is going to be really fun to see if Anthony Edwards against some defenders that can give him trouble. I think.
Yeah.
I think Draymond and Jimmy Butler collectively, the 2-headed monster that they are, can give Edwards some issues. The thing is Edwards is so confident, and the bigger the stage, it feels like the better he plays, to where I don't even know if 2 of the better defenders in the game can neutralize him. I think Edwards he's going to get his, man. He's averaging 27 in the playoffs. He averaged 27 in the regular season. I think he's going to score 27 many times in this series. It comes down to me. How does Julius Randle do against the Dubs?
Yep.
How's that matchup? Reid, does he go off from deep? Is he able to beat the Warriors inside? Does Gobert give them anything from a scoring perspective? And then it's some of those role players like DiVincenzo. We know what he brings to the table. Can he get some points going? Alexander Walker, does he step up? So that's what it kind of comes down to for me, because the top of the rosters are going to get theirs. Edwards on the Wolves side, Curry and Butler on the Warriors side. But as I say, the villagers, the pods, the buddies on the other side, the DiVincenzos and the McDaniels, whoever it may be, like which team's role players are going to be better, that may be the deciding factor in this one to me. And I agree. I think it's going to be a really close series, really good series. It does feel like the Wolves have picked up a lot of momentum as being the hot pick in this series, despite losing the regular season matchup in terms of the games. Without Jimmy Butler for the Warriors, A, and B, really having the same record pretty much the entire season until the last day of the year. So Wolves are the trendy pick right now because they dismantled the Lakers, whether that's black eye on the Lakers part, or whether the Wolves are just playing really, really good basketball, which the latter is true based on the way they finished the season. But we're going to find out how good these 2 teams are. This is the beautiful thing about the West, Ben.
Yeah.
Like, who knows, man?
Well, it's
Truly,
6 and 7 seed playing in the second round. I think I heard that this was the second time ever that there's been a 6 and a 7 seed playing in the second round, which tracks. I mean, like these
a weird
your
year. Traditional 6 and 7s, though,
right?
These
Exactly.
are
like easily could have been the 3 and the 4 seed in the West, right? Like everybody, there were 6 teams separated by 2 games or something like that. So it easily could have gone either way. And I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to role players. I think the ceiling of some of the Wolves players, Buddy Hield may have a crazy game, Pods may have a crazy game, but I think there's a higher likelihood of over the balance of the series, the Wolves role players between the reigning 6th man of the year, Nas and DiVincenzo. Like, I think there's enough guys that have the ability to get hot and maybe just score. Maybe 3 of those guys score 12 points, and that's enough, right? Like, I think there's a little bit better depth there than Golden State. Even if Steph Curry, like, he could easily be the best player in the series. Like, he could get hot. And like you said, he's playing some of the best basketball of his career. And then that could be what lifts the Warriors. But if it comes down to just straight up, like in a vacuum, I think the Wolves depth will help them as well in the series. And maybe some of those mismatches that they can create with Nas, Reid, and others. And then the size, rebounding, I think it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out.
And they're going to have the advantage in game 1, plenty of rest. The Warriors less than 48 hours of rest. So here's the big factor in this series. If the Warriors can somehow sneak out game 1 and take home court advantage, with the wobbly legs, whereas the Wolves have been rested. That's a huge wake-up call in the series, and I promise you it will put the national public on the it'll put the Warriors on the map at this point, because they've answered a lot of challenges this season. Ben Beecken from Locked On Wolves. I'm Charlie Walter from Locked On Warriors. This is the crossover episode. Appreciate everyone for joining the show. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the series, everyone.
All right, there you have it. A great conversation with Charlie Walter of Locked On Warriors, and we're going to see how it all shakes out tonight. Of course, the Locked On Wolves postcast will be over on YouTube on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Our guys Jack and Luke will have you covered there. If you can't watch it live following the game, it's going to be a late one. We'll have the audio for you here at Locked On Wolves. Wherever you listen to audio podcasts, you can listen to Jack and Luke, and then I'll be back, of course, as well tomorrow with Wednesday's show, the post-game pod. We'll talk about all things game one and get you ready for the rest of the week. Only one day between games for the first several games of this series, so kind of fast and furious here throughout the week. So we'll get you at the post-game pod tomorrow. Check out the postcast tonight. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder, you can make your second listen the Locked On NBA Game Night. That gets you covered all postseason until the champion's crown in late June. Hopefully that is the Wolves. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.